Hello and welcome to another episode of C-Vision International's Thought Leadership Series, brought to you by Noname Security. Thank you for tuning in. Joining us on the program is Karl Mattson, who is the CISO of Noname Security, the industry leader in proactive API security. Also on the program today is a very special guest, a recognized industry thought leader, a cybersecurity industry veteran, as well as a military veteran, having served as an intelligence officer in the Army. She currently serves as the CISO of SailPoint and as a member of the advisory board of Noname Security, who is the sponsor of our program. Please welcome our featured guest, Heather Gantt-Evans.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, thank you for being here with us. So we understand that you published an article not that long ago in VentureBeat magazine talking about the issues of bringing more women into cybersecurity and really highlighting the idea that more women could be in cybersecurity and really should be in cybersecurity, that it's a field open to all, but really should be a lot more welcoming and bringing more women into cybersecurity, a field that urgently needs diversity, and more voices at the table and speaking at the table. So on that point, I'd love to ask you maybe to start off by telling us about your career. How did you come into cybersecurity, and how did you become a success story in the industry, becoming an executive leader, and how did you break through some of these statistics that show such workforce disparity?
Yeah, I suppose I broke through a lot of statistics to get here, in that, I started my education and career journey as a single teen mom, right? And so by statistics, I wasn't even meant to finish college. So I get really passionate about talking about getting diverse folks in cybersecurity and folks from disadvantaged backgrounds into cybersecurity, because I think cybersecurity is rich for opportunity for everyone. It's a great equalizer in that way. You can come from any background and really, rise to the top. And we need you, right? So I guess to share my journey, I was really struggling to pay for school as a single mom, and I joined the military to help me pay for school. And I joined as a U.S. Army cyber threat intelligence analyst, where they trained me and gave me some really great transferable skills, and then also provided me a GI Bill to help pay me to go to school, right? And so I promptly was then able to finish an undergraduate degree in sociology, which doesn't sound anything like cybersecurity. And I then did some calculations, because at that point, my big driver was I wanted a lot of stability and opportunity for me and my daughter. And technology looked like the best place, based off the analysis that I had done, to find that for us. That being said, I was really, really scared to pursue anything in technology. I was scared of even just the educational program. I decided to pursue a master's in technology management, but I was not the kid tearing apart computers, for fun. Like I was really just genuinely intimidated by the field. But I enjoyed my master's program. I got a lot of wide exposure to various aspects of technology, to include some security aspects and coding aspects, and promptly got picked up by Booz Allen Hamilton to support the U.S. Air Force as an IT business analyst. So I didn't actually get started directly in cybersecurity, and was initially doing like IT governance work. And I really enjoyed that, but somebody came and knocked on my door, right? Like, as opportunities do. And they said, "Hey, Heather, Booz Allen has another contractor position open for a cyber threat intelligence analyst at Air Force Cyber Command." I said, "Oh, wow, that sounds really intimidating." And they said, "Well, we think you can figure it out, because you've done threat intelligence analysis, like in an all source way. So not necessarily cyber specific, but generalized threat intelligence analysis. And you've got some technology background. And so we really think you can add value and you can figure it out." And I am so excited I got that push, because it was the perfect first job in cybersecurity. I was literally getting paid to read cybersecurity reporting all day. And so I was learning about how all these different adversaries went about selecting targets, and how it is they went about exploiting those targets, and what they hope to gain from them, and patterns across different adversaries. And I was seeing all these terms that I would just jot down to go Google later. And I, after doing that for a couple of years, I started getting comfortable with this language, right? I started getting comfortable with these concepts, and I wanted to roll my sleeves up a little bit more and do some more hands-on keyboard work. And it just so happened that at that time, US Cyber Command was standing up what they called cyber protection teams. And these teams did both offensive and defensive missions in support of our nation. And so it was essentially a fusion cell, all these different types of operations going on. And I got to do things like malware analysis and intrusion analysis and support threat hunting missions, and even some of the offensive stuff. And so it was really, really great exposure. And somebody tapped me on my shoulder again and said, "Hey, we heard you're doing a great job, and we're at E&Y, and we're wanting to build out our cyber threat intelligence service offering." And so I got referred into one of the big fours to build out a net new service offering, which was great exposure to things like analyzing market demand, coming up with market materials, coming up with pricing, and thinking through how you were going to do service delivery and what team you needed. And at the same time, I was literally building out a cyber threat intelligence program for a Fortune 50 manufacturing firm on my first engagement. And I spent 5 years at E&Y. And my favorite thing about that was that when you're working at a consulting firm, you can raise your hand endlessly, right? There's so many different customers with unique problem sets across different verticals and industries. And so I said, "Hey, I want to build out security operations centers. Like, cyber threat intelligence needs to be part of all of the security operations center. And I understand that really well, and the connectivity between them. And I want to build that out." And I got to raise my hand and say, "Hey, I really want to build out cyber exercise programs. I want to make sure that the business is connected to how it is we need to respond to incidents, not just the SOC." And I got to raise my hand to do that even for some of the biggest banks in the nation, and coming up with cyber resilience exercises that really tested the connectivity between the cyber program and enterprise resiliency functions like legal and PR and crisis communications and business continuity and disaster recovery. And that was fascinating to me. And the last time I raised my hand at E&Y, it was like, "Hey, I want to focus on the whole cybersecurity program. I want to really assess maturity and help come up with the strategy." And it just so happened at the time that the CISO at Home Depot, who was freshly onboarded, needed some help analyzing the maturity and coming up with the strategy for a very large program, like over 400 people. And that ended up turning into like a 3-month job interview. And he ended up extending me an opportunity to come on and lead 150 people within his organization across all security operations and engineering. That was a super exciting time, and a big transition to go from managing projects to managing entire programs and so many people. And then most recently, I had an executive recruiter reach out to me about the opportunity here at SailPoint to get my first CISO appointment, which was exactly 10 years after I got my first full-time analyst role as an IT business analyst. And so it's been a quick trajectory and a fun ride where I've learned so much. And so when you ask, like, how did I get into cybersecurity? It was a lot of people that said, "Hey, I think you can figure this out," right? Or encouraged me to raise my hand. And it was that dipping my toe in a little by little until it didn't feel scary anymore, right?
It certainly helps to have good mentors, and it's really been helpful to my career personally. Of course, you've had an impressive career trajectory and the fastest rise I think I've heard of yet, from an analyst to a CISO. And here you are today, and it's certainly a story that can inspire and motivate many. You talk about, in your article, you outline these 3 myths, and one of the myths that you're talking about is needing a computer science degree to really just even get into cybersecurity. Can you talk a little more about that concept and share some examples of roles or people that expose this myth?
Yeah, I have some additional thoughts on the value of diverse backgrounds in cybersecurity and how we can purposely identify and build on those backgrounds that I want to share later. But for now, like, I can share 3 examples of women who have exposed that myth on my own team. Okay. So starting with most recently, we just onboarded a woman in our vulnerability management team. Her educational background is in biomedical science and biochemistry. She worked in a laboratory, like she worked in several laboratories actually, doing research and data analytics, and her strength as a data analyst is translating very well to vulnerability management, where she began adding value almost day one. You know, she's analyzing all the reports on the vulnerabilities, helping us slice and dice it to ensure we're tackling them in the right prioritization. And so that's one example. Another example is an individual we brought in. Her educational background is in early childhood education and teaching. She worked as a teacher and as a project manager in her past, and she's now adding immense value to our strategy and program management team across new team member onboarding program, monitoring our bit site score, and triaging findings across the subject matter experts with the team, security training and awareness program. I mean, who better than a teacher? And serving as our compliance and procurement team liaison and orchestrating the third-party risk reviews. It's just a lot of routing, you know, and she does an amazing job at handling all of that. And then the third woman I would highlight would be she has a background in from an educational perspective in PR and communications. She worked in insurance for many years, and she started as a business analyst, and she showed such strong communication, relationship building, and strategy skills that she went on to lead multiple product engineering teams throughout her career within the same insurance giant. And she showed immense flexibility to adapt and create an impact no matter where she went, and kind of became the fixer there. And so now she leads my security architecture and engineering organization and does an amazing job ensuring that the bridges that they need built are being bridged, that their work is being well documented and project managed, and that the communication plans around the rollouts are really well done. She's amazing at all that. So those are three like tangible examples on my team that I can provide.
That sounds very encouraging. And of course, well, we obviously need more diversity. We need to bring more talents to the mix. And it's not just for diversity's sake, right? There's real studies that demonstrate that bringing more voices to the table, different backgrounds, you know, non-traditional backgrounds, as we used to call it in cybersecurity. Although I can say from my personal experience, it's not really true anymore. I think we're seeing a lot more folks with degrees that are non-traditional, a lot of folks without degrees. And that's perfectly fine, because it's really about what you can bring to the table. Can you do the work, and can you get the opportunity to do the work, right? To really demonstrate your ability. And one of the things that I've certainly experienced over my career, and I've been in this business over 20 plus years, is this transition, right? You know, nobody really stays static for too long, and being able to be adaptive, to change your skills, to be more agile, that's really important. And so having that breadth of experience is great, and not a single person can do all of those jobs, wear all those hats. So you got to have those people at the table, and you got to have them in the room, and you got to have them empowered to speak. And so to that point, let me ask you the next question. So in your article, you talk about the level of involvement of women in the workforce within cybersecurity, and the statistic is 20%. Only 20% of cybersecurity workforce is actually composed of women. Do you see a trend in a positive and negative direction, and what can be done about this?
Yeah, I mean, I think people hear 20% and it's so easy to get discouraged. But if you think about the fact that in 2013, women made up just 11% of the cybersecurity workforce, we're making like progress in the right direction, and we're going to continue to see that progress. And so I think there's a lot we can do to continue to build on that progress that I think we'll chat about here in a second.
Well, sounds good. Well, so what are some of the most meaningful steps that we can take to make progress in attracting and retaining women to cybersecurity, both individually and as organizations?
Yeah, so the first and most important thing that comes to mind for me is having more approachable position descriptions. The way we write position descriptions like a laundry list is not conducive to having, certainly not women apply, because we're, statistics show we have tendencies to underestimate our qualifications, but it also, it makes it hard for people with diverse backgrounds, whether it be educational or professional backgrounds, and then it makes it seem so intimidating to you to career transition or to take on even an entry-level role with how we write those position descriptions. And so I think what we can do is we really need to design like thoughtful career paths based on non-cybersecurity backgrounds, right? So like the non-traditional backgrounds you were touching on. So like identify which roles lend themselves best to true entry-level work, meaning no cybersecurity background. I think that's another thing we get wrong. Like we say positions descriptions are entry-level, and it's like we want you to have a 4-year degree plus 2 years experience. Like that's not entry-level, right? And so we kind of need to get over ourselves there. But some examples are communication and education backgrounds for training and awareness jobs, data analytics backgrounds for metrics or vulnerability management jobs, like we touched on earlier, project management backgrounds for incident management, procurement backgrounds for third-party risk, product and program managers for strategic planning. And we've all seen like high IT help desk backgrounds for security operations or analytical backgrounds for threat intelligence. Once you've thought through like the various non-traditional backgrounds that would be a good fit for different types of roles within your team, then you can create a development plan to expand on the depth and breadth of knowledge that person can gain from that entry point over the course of their career, based on the connectivity that they're going to naturally have with cybersecurity services, or based on inorganic connectivity that you design through thoughtful shadowing programs or job rotational programs or training programs, right? Gaining certifications or going to boot camps. So net, I think we need to be purposeful in designing where we think non-traditional backgrounds fit, and then be purposeful in proactively reaching out to people with those backgrounds to encourage them to apply, and articulate the value of those backgrounds in your position description. That's something I really want to work on. And I think that if as an industry we do that, we would see huge leaps in diversity.
Well, that's absolutely critical, and I couldn't agree more. I think there's a lot to unpack in what you said, and I think that you made a lot of great, interesting points, and I can certainly attest to a lot of these. Right, everything you've said is absolutely ringing true with me, and I've certainly observed this across my career and in many organizations that I worked with, both captively and as a consultant or advisor. And I think there's this traditional view of cybersecurity that is an engineering field, or it's a STEM field, and by and large it is, right? But ultimately, I think we've now matured enough in our practice that we understand that, especially around leadership and strategy, there's a lot of human factors involved. And it's simply not a technology problem. Traditionally, yes, CISOs were looked at as sort of the offshoot from IT, and they were there to manage security technology, not so much security or risk or really holistically approach the idea of business resilience. And I think we've matured enough as an organization, as an industry, as a set of practitioners and professionals to understand that this is not the way it is, right? That we need to bring in those soft skills. And, we used to say kind of broadly soft skills, but I think we've gotten a little better. We've gotten a little better about defining what they are. And to your point about job descriptions, we used to write them to kind of weed out the unqualified candidates. I don't think we have that luxury anymore. I think the level of underemployment within this industry, the fact that we have so many folks just out there that we need to bring in, we don't get to weed anybody out. We actually need to get the opportunity to as many folks as possible. Obviously, there's a minimal threshold of qualification, right? But once they come in, there's a lot of work to be done. And some of that work does not happen to be highly technical, and they still need to operate within a security space, and they still need to contribute, and we just need to bring them in, right? So using our job descriptions as the sort of a shield against unqualified candidates, that's a mentality that's probably 20 years old, right? But we still barely evolved beyond it. That's definitely one of the things that I certainly advocate for when we look at procuring more talent. So on the next question, I'd love to actually hear from Karl, because he's been in the background, but we've been talking about your article, and I'd love to hear from him as well. And the next question is, there are many men in the field of cybersecurity who aspire to be allies and supporting more women participating in the cybersecurity field. What guidance can we give to these men so they can be a positive ally, so they can be more of a supportive force for this effort?
Yeah, I think the first thing is to listen to people like Heather, who've made this journey and take notes. Like as I listen to Heather, the journey that I went through in the military, then in the corporate world, and then ultimately to a technology company was relatively similar. And I think part of that starts with we had the advantage of starting in working for the government, where there are structures in place that sort of respect equity in a way that I was sort of surprised not to find was true in the corporate world. So I want to think about this problem structurally, and what are we doing to attract a workforce to begin with, when people are high school students and college students, and attract them into, and then having mentorships along the way and opportunities that arise because we have people in our lives who say yes, even though maybe we don't have the perfect resume on paper, but they believe in us. And so all of these elements that Heather's bringing up, I think really ring true in terms of like where we can focus. And I think of the aspect of mentorship in particular. I feel like that's the kind of the call to action for me, is to find ways to give somebody, give somebody a chance, and kind of forget about some of those artificial barriers that we put in place. And by the way, the job descriptions, it's amazing. I don't know a single CISO who's been around a minute who actually was trained in cybersecurity as their original skill set. None of us were. I was an intelligence analyst, and then I went to business school. Like, nobody who's been in this industry was trained to be in cybersecurity. That's a pretty recent phenomenon, that people actually, like in college, got trained in a cybersecurity discipline. So to put that requirement in place for any organization is kind of hypocritical, because none of us started that way. None of us had CISSPs when we entered the field, and it's kind of it's ironic that we still have to think about that, because the people writing the job descriptions, it didn't apply to them when they were applying for the job 10 years ago. And it's funny how we still have we're putting that barrier in place where it's sort of proven not to work. So.
Indeed. So same question to you, Heather. Of course, it's what are your thoughts on this? How do you promote these ideas with the entire organization, and how do you create the kinds of structures that Karl was just talking about, where you can promote equity, you can promote equal opportunity, and you can actually encourage folks to apply who would traditionally be discouraged from pursuing these kinds of career tracks?
Yeah, when I think about what it means to be an ally and to really advance on these topics, there's like 3 key attributes that I think make you an ally. And the first is like speaking up, the second showing up, and the third's drawing out. And so let me kind of decipher that for you real quick. I think speaking up about the importance of diversity to the success of the organization. To your earlier point, there are a ton of reports out there and studies that show that the most successful companies and ideas come from a diverse set of people. Secondly, speaking up about the importance of defining goals around diversity and transparently measuring progress. It can be very frustrating to still this day and time run into organizations where you can't report diversity metrics at all levels. There's not transparency around that, and so I think there's a lot of progress that we can still make there, because just like with the success of any project, for the success of marching towards diversity goals, you have to set the goals and you have to measure against them. And then sharing ideas on how to retain and attract diverse talent. When we hear about something that's working, we read a study, just speaking up about an idea. And then the last way I think it's important to speak up is to be a champion and an encourager. When I was recounting my journey, I explained that there were several people that encouraged me along the way, but I didn't touch on the fact that there were multiple people who championed me when I wasn't even in the room. So they were, when they heard about a tough problem that needs solving, they said, "Have you thought of Heather?" And that's what it means to be a champion. When they heard about an opportunity, right? Whether it be promotion or a new account, "Have you thought of Heather?" Right? And so being that champion is so important, even when especially when the person you're championing isn't in the room. Being proactive to identify those women that you want to champion, or other folks across diversity categories. And then on showing up, it's so important to show up to women-centric events. I know it can feel awkward, but like doing so illustrates to women that you are an advocate in your actions and not just your words. And it shows your female colleagues that you are a safe place to discuss nuances of being a woman in the field. And it's good for everyone to experience being the minority in the room at times, right? It gives you more empathy to that experience. And then on drawing out, like, be really purposeful to draw out diverse perspectives. Anybody can make an impact here, right? So ask for the quiet person's opinion in the room. Leverage parallel thinking approaches to ensure that we're systematically thinking through all aspects of a problem set to draw out various opinions, because there's always the people that are going to be more predisposed to focusing on the negatives. There's going to be, and then that's going to quiet the folks that want to focus on innovation or the positives. So like, hey, let's all think about the negatives right now. Let's all think about the positives. Let's all think about the idea generation. Like, doing things like that can help draw out diverse perspectives. Solicit anonymous feedback on how what the experience is as a diverse person on the team, right? So there's so many ways you can draw out diverse perspectives. And additionally to drawing out diverse candidates, like what we were talking about, like going to the colleges or specifically asking recruiters to target people with diverse backgrounds that would be a good fit for the type of role you're sourcing for, instead of like sticking into the box I loved the phrase that Karl used, like, like these kind of like imaginary barriers that we've put in place. So, like, try to, tear those down when you can.
That's very important. And of course, I think it's really insightful that we've spoken for close to half an hour now, 3 CISOs in the room, and we haven't really mentioned technology much. We've been talking about culture and transformation and strategy and allyship. And I think that's very insightful. I think it's really indicative of where this space is moving. Security leadership has really transitioned, and it certainly is evolving from this purely technical kind of STEM-centric type field and really becoming more holistic, a lot more diverse, a lot more rounded. And of course, that again speaks to the need to bring more of those kinds of talent, these diverse backgrounds, to the table. And again, draw them out, as you said yourself. I think that's really important, and encourage them to participate fully. Provide that support, and really, I think career tracks. It's another important point that you made, Heather. And I think, historically, somebody asked me very recently, how did you get into this business, right? And I kind of went through a lot of the things that you went through in your article. Yes, I was that kid who was writing code at 13. Yes, I was tearing things down and figuring out how they worked, right? And kind of, just poking around. It was totally accepted, right? And I know for a fact, if I were not a 13-year-old boy doing these kinds of things, they would probably be discouraged, right? I probably would be pushed into other activities, probably find myself in a different career path. And I can say, honestly, I probably fall into some of my early roles just by being around these kinds of things, right? And I just, I grabbed onto them, I held on and prove myself. And I think those early opportunities are especially important. As folks try to get into this field, it seems intimidating. The career, it looks like something that's tough to get into because of those barriers that we historically had. The job descriptions, as we talked about at length. All of these, if you start really kind of taking a 30,000-foot view and you say, well, what is this doing to the industry? And where do we want to be as an industry 10, 15, 20 years from now? Because those folks are the future CISOs. They're entering right now. And worse yet, they probably are discouraged from entering. So how do we make sure that they actually come in through the gates, that we're not gatekeepers, that we actually throw those gates open and bring in as many folks as possible? Look, the industry is tough enough. It sorts people out, right? And if you can't hack it, guess what? Pardon the pun, right? If you can't hack it, last. So we don't need to create extra barriers. The industry will kind of figure it out for itself. And look, there's plenty of opportunity within this industry now. It's not a purely technical job. There's many things you can do. So any talent can really play. And I think the more we say it, the more we apply it to the recruiting function. Early reach out, going down to the high schools, even junior high schools, right? Figuring out as early as possible, letting people know that there is a path. And also, I think a lot more certainty about the career trajectories. I think a lot of us, again, we've experienced sort of this, a series of fortunate events that we've strung together into a successful career. And we sit here today as evidence of that. But I think having a more defined path where you know exactly what kind of skills you need to attain, how do you need to prove yourself, what kind of what kind of extra skills you need to develop to become more rounded as a professional, as a practitioner, as a leader eventually, if that's the career you choose. I think that's really important. And I think historically we haven't defined that enough. And there is absolutely no excuse. This industry has been around too long for us to not have that in place. And I think every one of us certainly takes that to heart. And events like this are certainly helpful in bringing that message out. So any final thoughts from Karl and Heather before we wrap this up?
Well, one thing, Igor, just to point out the obvious, there are so many companies out there who are going through a 5-alarm fire of skills shortages. And like what an obvious match between the need of the industry to have talented people and the sort of the ethical, like being fair and honest with our workforce about creating opportunities and promotions and all of those things. All of those things together, plus then what Heather mentioned is exactly right. It's the perspectives that it takes to solve complex problems need to come from all over. It's like the idea that we need to do better at bringing women into the cybersecurity field. There's so many reasons to do that right now, and all of those. I think all of those are true, and we can't afford not to on every level, because as an industry, we need that talent to enter our sort of our collective horsepower to be secure.
Absolutely. Thank you for that comment, Karl. Heather, final thoughts?
I'm just excited that y'all are providing a platform for this topic. That's such a big part of being an ally. So I just want to thank you.
Well, thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us and all the amazing insight. We look forward to speaking to you soon. And to our audience, thank you for being here. Thank you for tuning in. Noname, thank you for sponsoring, and C-Vision International. Another episode coming soon. Stay tuned. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.